Tonight, the federal government defends accusations the Prime Minister went easy on Qantas in return for free upgrades and other perks. Hello, I'm Pamela Medlen. This is ABC News. A final push for votes. Donald Trump rallies in the Garden, while Kamala Harris hits the streets of Philadelphia. The switch-off begins. 3G mobile services around the country go dark. And 40 years after captivating the world, ice skating icons Torvill and Dean prepare for their last dance. The Prime Minister is facing close scrutiny for receiving perks from Qantas when he was the Transport Minister. It follows reports he liaised directly with former Qantas boss Alan Joyce to get flight upgrades for personal trips overseas. Here's National Affairs Editor Melissa Clark.
Qantas' largesse for politicians includes free upgrades on flights and access to the exclusive Chairman's Lounge. Almost every federal MP accepts the gifts and declares them.
They'll boost us up so they can take those 2 or 3 economy seats.
I think there's a lot of people who just fly generally, get offered upgrades and take them. I think we all do that.
But the Prime Minister is under additional scrutiny, with a new book on Qantas reporting that Anthony Albanese didn't just receive flight upgrades at the gate, but liaised directly with Qantas CEO Alan Joyce about upgrades for his personal travel, including when he was the Transport Minister.
Thanks, mate. When you're talking about having a personal phone call to ask for an upgrade as the Transport Minister or the Shadow Transport Minister, I presume the Prime Minister is going to answer questions about that.
The PM has declined to detail his contact with Alan Joyce, but yesterday defended receiving the upgrades.
Every single thing has been declared. Every single thing has been declared, which is why it's been reported on.
The defence from his colleagues ranged from lukewarm.
I know that the Prime Minister was asked about this, I think, multiple times yesterday in his press conference. I don't have anything to add to it.
To full-throated attack on the opposition leader.
He's had free flights paid for by Gina Rinehart, who we know has influence over the coalition and the policy direction it takes.
Government ministers point to a number of occasions where the Labor Party has opposed Qantas's actions as evidence the Prime Minister isn't in the airline's pocket. But at the very least, receiving gifts creates the potential for a conflict of interest. And the defence that other politicians receive gifts too doesn't ameliorate that. Rather, it highlights how common it is for MPs to receive favours from corporations. Melissa Clark, ABC News, Canberra.
Federal Labor's most senior Queenslander, Jim Chalmers, has conceded his party was squarely beaten in Saturday's state election, puncturing the narrative that Labor did better than expected. The result is a big wake-up call for the Albanese government as it prepares for a tough federal election next year. Here's Chief Digital Political Correspondent Jacob Grieber.
Labor's been pushing the narrative that Saturday's Queensland election was close and could have been a lot worse. Outside of Brisbane, it's hard to see how. As the dust settles, senior federal Labor sources now concede the state result is full of bad omens for Anthony Albanese. In the regions, Labor got hammered by double-digit swings, losing some seats for the first time in more than a century. Votes are still being counted, but David Crisafulli is on par with what Joe Bjelke-Petersen won in 1986 at the peak of his popularity. Federal Labor's most senior Queenslander, Jim Chalmers, is the first to call it for what it is, a decisive victory by the LNP. And that's a worry for the Prime Minister. He needs to expand his tally of just 5 out of 30 federal seats in Queensland. And the question after Saturday is how. Strategists on both sides agree crime and cost of living were the big vote movers, and that throwing money and freebies and ideas like government petrol stations at voters is no guarantee of political success. The Treasurer's now hosing down calls for big handouts.
This election was never going to be, from our side, a free-for-all of public spending. It wasn't going to be before Saturday's outcome, and it's not going to be after Saturday's outcome.
The Greens were the other big losers. Labor says they were hurt by Max Chandler Mather's solidarity with the CFMEU. Their leader, Adam Bant, blames Labor for stealing their ideas and being too obsessed with his party instead of the LNP. It's a surprising claim, given both the Greens and Labor went backwards. In Parliament, Labor's been frustrated for months by the Greens blocking housing and environmental reforms. Now it's the Greens stressing they're ready to negotiate and cooperate to keep the coalition out of office.
Donald Trump has closed out his penultimate weekend of campaigning with a star-studded rally in the heart of New York City. But as Mr Trump courted votes in a state he's expected to lose, his Democratic opponent Kamala Harris was in a key battleground, with polling showing the race for the White House deadlocked just 8 days from Election Day. North America correspondent Barbara Miller reports from New York City.
Donald Trump loves a big crowd, and he got one in the heart of New York, the city where he made his name and fortune.
Good evening, New York City!
The Republican nominee was introduced by someone rarely seen on his campaign, his wife. It was a high-octane event featuring some of Trump's favourite support acts.
I don't see no stinking Nazis in here.
Including the world's richest man.
The future is gonna be amazing!
But once on stage, the Republican presidential candidate delivered a pretty standard stump speech.
I will end inflation. I will stop the invasion of criminals coming into our country. And I will bring back the American dream.
Thousands of supporters lined up for hours for the chance to catch a glimpse.
He loves God, he loves country, he loves our people, he loves his family, he has integrity.
Also doing the rounds are Donald Trump and a Kim Jong-un look-alike.
People love me. They really do.
Crowd size is extremely important to my friend Donald Trump.
The latter revealing himself to be a Melbourne satirist.
If he gets into power, people in Australia is going to feel the effects.
Donald Trump's very unlikely to take New York State in next week's election. But the ultimate showman has got to see his name in lights again back in the Big Apple. And for him, that will count as a big win.
Democratic nominee Kamala Harris was in a swing state, Pennsylvania, courting the votes of young black men and Latinos and holding her own rally.
Each of us has an opportunity to make a difference, because in this moment we do face a real question. What kind of country do we want to live in?
Kamala, you're fired. Get out.
Donald Trump will also likely be back in the battleground soon. But today was all about reminding his hometown that he's not done with it yet. Barbara Miller, ABC News, New York.
Earlier this month, Niche Living agreed to drop its building registration challenge so customers could access the government's home indemnity insurance. But some customers are still in limbo, waiting for other builders, forcing many to rent in the meantime. And now issues of non-compliance in the builds are being discovered, adding more grief to the ongoing saga.
For Nelson and Kirsten Prey, they wanted marriage, a house and then a baby, but the order of those milestones was robbed from them.
We put off trying to have a child for 2 years, just trying to get that confirmation. We decided last year in 2023 to start because we were meant to have our house by the deadline of November.
The pair are renting in Parmelia in Perth South with their now 8-month-old baby, waiting for their Aurelia build to be finished. They signed up with Niche Living in December 2020 using a first home buyer's grant and were told they'd be in within 392 days from construction starting. But delays arose and communication fizzled.
One of the owners makes comments about how it felt like Christmas for him when all these houses were being signed up on, and it's like, then he blames the government for them overselling, and it's like, you can't have it both ways. To me, it's kind of like a spoiled kid that eats too much candy and then blames the parents for being sick.
Niche Living has withdrawn its SAT proceedings, thereby bringing to a close the period of limbo customers have been in.
What is that?
I don't know. It looks like bad wiring.
The government's intervention was certainly welcomed by the couple, but already issues with the build have been noticed. An independent inspector told them the master bedroom ceiling is too low in parts to comply with building standards. There's also a crack in their concrete slab. A company has offered to finish their build, which it says would take 4 months, but not until the new year, which means at least another 6 months of renting. Now, just this message for the company's directors.
It's always been about them and their company and their problems and their excuses. It's not just me and my family, there's 200 of us, and it's always been about them.
The couple says they'll look to sell after living there for a year. The memories of the last 4 years too painful to create new ones. Courtney Withers, ABC News.
Passenger restrictions for P-platers have been welcomed by young people wanting to keep safe on WA roads. Announced at the weekend, Tom's Law is one of a number of measures the state government has been considering to address road deaths.
Speeding, well done.
Perth's youngest drivers learning to keep safe on the road.
I'm a bit scared, to be honest, because I know there's a lot of risks involved, but then I also know that if I follow all the rules, then I'm going to be all right.
Under new rules, P-plate drivers will be banned from having more than one passenger for their first 6 months behind the wheel. Young people appear largely supportive.
As much as, it'd be fun to be able to take all my friends to the beach or to the movies or something, I feel like it's better because I feel like I could say I'm not going to be distracted, but I would end up being distracted.
The laws have also been welcomed by Jodie Nikolic, who lost the function of her legs after being struck by a car while cycling overseas. She later heard the driver was over the legal alcohol limit and had been using his mobile phone at the time. Now an injury prevention presenter, Ms Nikolic educates young people about the dangers of driving distracted.
The other causes of crashes, driving under the influence and fatigue, and these are things that they can manage, but distraction for all of us. I do this for a living and I catch myself being distracted sometimes while I'm driving.
The new P-plate rules are named after Tom Safiotti, who was a passenger in a fatal crash 3 years ago. His mother Samantha has been lobbying for the laws ever since.
Oh, it means everything to us. We love and we miss Tom every second of every day. And to have him honoured in this way that could potentially save lives is just, it's just so overwhelming and just pure love.
The new laws will come into effect from December and a state government review will consider further road safety measures. Phoebe Pinn, ABC News.
A woman who faked her own death to access an insurance payout of more than $700,000 has been sentenced to 3 years in prison. Karen Marie Salkild received the payout after claiming she died in a car accident in Broome last year. The 43-year-old provided various false documents to access the funds using her former partner's identity. Salkild was sentenced in the Perth District Court after earlier pleading guilty to gaining a benefit by fraud and to knowingly using a false record to defraud. She'll be eligible for parole after serving half of her 3-year term. Lawyers for journalist Antoinette Lattouf will argue former ABC Chair Ita Buttrose and Managing Director David Anderson were either decision makers or materially involved in her sacking last year. Ms Lattouf is suing the ABC for unfair dismissal in the federal court. She was taken off air partway through a radio presenting stint in December after sharing a social media post about the war in Gaza. The court heard the ABC contends the chief content officer was the decision maker. The journalist argues she was fired for expressing a political opinion and that race was a factor. The ABC denies that. Australia's 3G network is officially over. Today, Telstra and Optus began switching off the service after Vodafone and TPG did it months ago. Many were prepared for the shutdown, but others have their doubts.
You say goodbye and I say hello.
2 decades after saying hello to 3G, the nation is now saying goodbye.
Australia's remaining 3G networks will close from 28 October.
The 3G network is just not fit for purpose.
So that's the main reason we're shutting it down. We're going to repurpose it for 5G, which means that we can roll out 5G much more efficiently and quicker.
Many in regional Australia have been upgrading their infrastructure for months or even years.
I've actually surveyed a few businesses today, and a few of them actually said, oh, didn't that already happen? So I think they're pretty prepared.
The shutdown is happening in a staged process around the country. 3G users will first lose access to calls and data, and eventually even 000 calls will be blocked. The government says there are programs in place to give free replacement phones to vulnerable people. Smartwatches, security systems and personal medical alarms that use the 3G network will also be affected.
Family members and neighbours will need to remind elderly people in particular that they should be looking at their telephone coverage and seeing if their telephone is up to date.
Some in rural areas aren't sold on the promise of faster speeds when black spots remain.
Supposedly I have coverage, but you can't make a call with no bars. It just drops out, which is fine if you're within the area of the house, but outside of that, no calls. So that's where I'll get a bit worried about my safety out in the farm.
We said that we would not shut down 3G until we provided complete equivalence of coverage to 3G. And we've done that.
Telstra and Optus say customers can reach out if they need support in making the shift. Adrian Reardon, ABC News. Coming up on 7:30, more on the power of the national carrier. Sarah Ferguson speaks to the journalist who put flight perks in the spotlight.
How do you describe the relationship between Qantas and Anthony Albanese?
Cosy, comorbid. It's been a long-standing relationship, particularly under the previous leadership, and sometimes if you work the right assets, you get lucky.
A fresh two-day truce has been proposed between Israel and Hamas. The latest deal would release at least 4 hostages and get urgent aid into Gaza. It comes as Israeli forces expand operations inside the enclave and to its north in Lebanon, with more than 70 people killed in the past 24 hours.
A school turned shelter in the Al-Shati refugee camp, reduced to rubble by an Israeli airstrike. People rushed to the bomb site in Gaza City to free those trapped.
There are a number of martyrs. 11 martyrs arrived at Al-Shifa and Al-Ali hospital and a large number of injuries. Most of the injuries are children and women.
And as civilian casualties grow, Egypt's president has joined the growing calls for a ceasefire to allow urgent aid into the enclave and get hostages home.
We affirm that our brothers in the Gaza Strip are facing an extremely difficult siege, reaching the point of starvation, and it is crucial that aid enters as quickly as possible.
In Lebanon, the coastal city of Sidon came under fire for the first time since Israel opened a second front against the militant group Hezbollah last month. And Israel has attacked the group's backer, Iran, over the weekend, retaliation for a ballistic missile barrage earlier this month.
The attack in Iran was precise and powerful and achieved all of its objectives.
Iran's supreme leader insisting the strikes should not be downplayed or exaggerated.
They are yet to appreciate Iran's power, capability, creativity and willpower. We must make them understand those.
Israel also faces threats from within its own borders. North of Tel Aviv, a truck ploughed into a bus stop outside a military base in Glilot, injuring dozens. Police say the alleged attacker, an Arab Israeli, was shot dead by bystanders.
The investigators will be poring over the wreckage for some time, looking for any clues they can, but we also know that Israel's intelligence service will be looking into this matter, trying to figure out what they can about the driver as they consider if this was a terrorist attack.
Perhaps a tougher question for the intelligence service is how to keep Israelis safe at home. Matthew Doran, ABC News, Glilot.
British-Australian mining giant Rio Tinto wants to build a lithium mine so big it could supercharge Europe's renewable energy transition. But the proposal is proving controversial because the valuable mineral would be mined underneath a small community in Serbia. It sparked mass protests across the Balkan nation, has drawn in global powers, and there are even accusations of Russian meddling. Europe correspondent Mazoe Ford reports from Western Serbia.
This is the Jadar Valley in western Serbia. Above ground, there's forest and farming. Below, Rio Tinto has found lithium. Farmer Zlatko Kokanovic's family has lived here for 7 generations. Rio Tinto's bought 50 properties nearby and wants his too.
I don't have any intention of selling my property. I live here with my family. I have made my business here. This land is sacred to me.
Rio Tinto wants to build a mine underneath the agriculture to extract enough lithium for 1 million electric vehicle batteries per year.
We've got enough for at least 40 years of mining, and that would be the largest, longest life, highest grade deposit in all of Europe.
So it's pretty valuable to Rio Tinto?
Oh, pretty valuable to the people of Loznica, the people of Serbia and Rio Tinto.
Many Serbians, though, don't believe that. Thousands have turned out to protest, worried about the soil, water and wildlife.
I think that it will destroy our environment.
We've seen a wave of disinformation around the project.
Several scientists in Serbia say the environmental concerns are legitimate.
It's not our job to scare people. Our job is to tell the truth. You cannot have both mine and biodiversity, habitats and landscapes that we have. It's impossible.
Serbia's government is already in talks with car manufacturer Mercedes-Benz, Germany and the EU about the lithium's potential.
It is certainly an economic opportunity, it's a geostrategic opportunity, it's political opportunity.
The minister says the mine will only go ahead if it meets environmental conditions, but opponents believe she's already made up her mind and they're vowing to keep up their fight. Zoe Ford, ABC News, Western Serbia.
To finance now, and the Australian dollar fell below 66 US cents today for the first time in 2 months, but the local share market was flat. Here's Alan Kohler.
The US dollar is surging at the moment because traders and investors now think that it's not a recession in America they have to worry about, but another burst of inflation. And that's because both presidential candidates plan to either increase government spending or cut taxes, or both, and therefore increase the budget deficit, with estimates ranging up to an extra $15 trillion. Now, that sort of fiscal stimulus would make a recession completely impossible and spell the end of any interest rate cuts. Therefore, US dollar up and Aussie dollar down, below 66 for the first time in a while. Good for exporters, bad for travellers. On the share market, there was a spill in the yellowcake aisle, with uranium miner Paladin Energy down 15% after revealing that its attempt to buy a Canadian uranium deposit for $1 billion has been put on hold by the Canadian government for national security reasons, for goodness sake. Oh, and a minute's silence for Mosaic Brands Limited, owner of shops such as Rockman's, Rivers, Noni B and Katie's. It was suspended and put on life support 2 months ago, but the plug was pulled today and it's gone to meet its receiver. The share market as a whole went up a bit. The US market held its breath on Friday, while shares in Tokyo rose 2% today, and the crude oil price fell because Israel decided to slap Iran rather than punch it. The Financial Review had an interesting graph today. The number of property investors or landlords is in decline, especially those that are negatively geared. The proportion of taxpayers claiming tax losses has fallen below 10% for the first time in 20 years. And that's finance.
British Formula One driver Lando Norris has described Max Verstappen as dangerous after the world champion was given 2 time penalties during the Mexico City Grand Prix. Spaniard Carlos Sainz won the race ahead of Norris and Charles Leclerc, while Australian Oscar Piastri finished 8th after starting from 17th. Verstappen was penalised 20 seconds by the stewards for forcing his championship rival Norris off the track on 2 occasions on lap 10. The Dutchman, Verstappen, finished 6th, and his championship lead over Norris has been cut to 47 points with 4 races to go.
I was ahead the whole way through the corner. This guy is dangerous. I just have to avoid a crash. It's the same as last time, mate. Yeah, we're on it, mate. I'll end up in a wall in a minute.
Few performances have gone down in history like Jane Torval and Christopher Dean's routine to Ravel's Bolero. The ice skating couple captured the world's attention at the Sarajevo Winter Olympics 40 years ago, remaining in the public eye since. And now they're preparing for an Australian farewell tour.
a legendary duo back in their skates. 40 years ago, Torvill and Dean stunned the world with this routine. Skating to Ravel's Bolero, it received almost perfect scores, sweeping gold at major competitions, including at the World Championships. Can you remember that moment?
I do actually, because when we see playbacks, it was almost like kind of a relief that, you know, we'd skated well for the European Championships, the Olympics we'd already won, and the World Championship was the third one. We wanted all three that year.
At that moment, it might have been a relief, but it was also this, like, what's next?
Yeah.
The duo is in Australia to promote their final tour together. That visit in June next year will be the first time the pair have performed here in public since 1994. They say that this tour will be their last before they retire from skating.
We started to really enjoy performing in front of a live audience in big arenas, and to see them enjoying watching us.
And watching on today, perhaps the next Torvill and Dean.
It was so amazing. It's a one-life opportunity.
This is what it's all about, the kids.
Yeah.
It's their, you know, the future of what they get out of it. Not everybody's going to be a champion, but it's a discipline.
Practice making for a perfect career, which has never been on thin ice. Digby Worthwaller, ABC News, Sydney.
Now to the weather with Tabarak Jrood. The forecast has cooled off a bit since last week's predictions.
Yeah, that's right, Pamela. We're not expecting to see those very hot temperatures in the high 30s anymore, but it's still going to be warm and sunny, pretty much similar to what we had today when we reached a top of 31.8 degrees around 2:30 this afternoon after a mild low of 14. And right now it's still fairly warm in the city at 25 degrees. Overnight, temperatures were also mild across the southern half, but cooler along the south coast. Salmon Gums dropped to 4 degrees, the coldest in the state, while it was another warm day over the north with a low-intensity heat wave across parts of the Kimberley. The highest maximum was 42 degrees, recorded at Marble Bar, Wyndham and Kununurra Airport. On the satellite, there is a bit of cloud cover stretching from the Kimberley region to the interior. We also had some thunderstorms across that region yesterday, which produced some decent falls. Phillips Range recorded 41 millimetres, but the heat is going to persist across the northern half this week as a broad trough lies over the region. We also have that west coast trough, which is dragging down the warmer air from the north to southern parts. So things are warming up for pretty much the whole state. That system will start moving inland tomorrow, but will hang around until about the weekend. So we will be getting an early taste of summer this week. Taking a look around the country tomorrow, partly cloudy over in Sydney, Melbourne and Hobart, a possible shower in Brisbane, mostly sunny and 25 in Canberra and Adelaide, and a possible storm on the cards for Darwin. Back home, heat wave conditions are continuing for parts of the Kimberley, becoming severe for some patches in the west, with very warm temperatures reaching the high 30s to low 40s. Showers and thunderstorms are also possible over the Kimberley, central and eastern parts of the Pilbara and Gascoyne, as well as over much of the interior and the goldfields. The heat is also really starting to build over the central parts of the state, with temperatures climbing 8 to 14 degrees above average. Morowa and Mullawa set to reach just shy of 40 degrees. Further south, we've also got more sunshine and warm conditions, especially over in the Great Southern and parts of the Southwest Land Division. 33 degrees at Collie, 37 in Hyden tomorrow. Meanwhile, southerly winds will keep conditions slightly cooler along the southwest coast. In Perth tomorrow, we've got another warm day ahead. We're going from an overnight low of 15 degrees to a top of 32, 35 in Ellenbrook and 37 in Gingin. On local waters, winds will be southerly 10 to 15 knots, then tending southeast to southwesterly 15 to 25 knots early in the morning, and seas up to 2 metres. The sun will rise at 5:22, setting at 6:39. And then looking ahead, we've got more lovely beach weather on the forecast, with temperatures in the low 30s on Wednesday and Thursday. Mostly sunny and 28 degrees on Friday, before we see some cooler conditions and a possible shower over the weekend, Pamela.
That sounds nice. I'm not quite sure we're ready for 37 yet, Tabarak. That's ABC News for now. We'll be back with you tomorrow. In the meantime, of course, you can stay up to date with ABC News online, or you can catch the news anytime on ABC iView. Stay with us now, though, for 7:30.